THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracies, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion, and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, you can go to www.thatalks.com to listen to and to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, or maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Hello, welcome back to THA Talks. It's been a while. We're going to be speaking with John White again, who's also not been on for a while. So we're going to be catching up with John, find out what he's been up to. I've actually been, obviously, you know that the website's been updated. It looks a bit better and it runs a bit quicker. Still not finished yet, still adding to it, but a kind of light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of alternative social media success at the moment. We've got platforms like VK, Parler are starting to gather momentum. I mean, VK around Europe, it's actually a proper competitor for the big networks, but it believes in free speech and free political freedom. You just don't break the law, basically. Don't say that's all that's needed to control anything in the civilized world, is just stick to the law, rather than have these Facebooks and Twitters that stick their own political ideology and what people can and can't say, and unfairly banning and restricting, which we've experienced ourselves. Twitter's banned my account, and I can't really create new accounts and share content because they find out it's me and they ban me. And Facebook has left our page there dormant because there's no account holders that can control it. So it's been really difficult in that regard, and perhaps it was contributed in slowing down a little bit because it's very frustrating. So that might be a factor, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Parler particularly is very new, Twitter alternative. You could say it's an echo chamber going the other way, but maybe that's how it's going to be. You're just going to have social media platforms are going to be very politically aligned, and you just choose a few that you want to talk, but it certainly needs balancing out and stuff, and it will certainly help independent podcasts like this to get the show out there more. So if you go to our website, you might notice there's going to be more social media platforms and media platforms added to it. Some of it haven't even promoted yet, so we might have no users on it, or no subscribers, should I say. So if you see it, go ahead and subscribe and tell your friends about it if they like the show as well. Because I'm just going to start building it up and seeing which ones build up most, and which become more popular and which are worth using. So I'm just trying them all out, basically. They'll be on the homepage. If you scroll down, you'll see them all there. And if you're subscribed yourself to some of these networks, go ahead and add us. But anyway, without any further ado, we are going to go and speak with John White. How are you doing? How are you doing, John? It's been a while.
Hello, Paul. Hello, THA. Oh, I'm just thinking at the start of this, I always like to try and start with a bit of an upbeat, go, hello, but blimey, it ain't very happy out there at the moment, is it, Paul?
Not at all. It's chaotic times, to say the least. Very negative, a lot of negativity.
It's been a very difficult year for everybody.
Yeah, I mean...
And I have a feeling it ain't over yet, not by a long shot.
Also, I mean, you've been very quiet recently. You had us worried because your health wasn't the best, and so you've basically been taking a little bit of time out.
I have. I had to sort of sit back from my usual level activity. I had a health problem that took a couple of months to really sort of resolve itself. I'm feeling much more like myself now, so I'm happy to be diving back in. And I've got a lot to talk about, because there's huge amounts of information about this. So I'm here to talk about Black Lives Matter and the campaign to abolish whiteness.
That's right. Well, I mean, the thing is, I'd like to say, just because I've been commenting a lot on social media about this sort of stuff, My feelings is it's the same old thing, like with Black Lives Matter. If you don't support Black Lives Matter, then you don't care about black people. I'd just like to say for the record, Black Lives Matter isn't just a movement that's about black people. It's a political ideology as well. And while we can all admit there are certain issues in the black community with gun crime and this kind of stuff, and for whoever's fault it is, it's an issue and it causes suffering and needs to be addressed and needs to be solved, because you don't want to have big communities where people are suffering. That doesn't mean that Black Lives Matter is the answer. And while my personal position, I do not support Black Lives Matter at all, I'm very open and responsive to the reality that there are issues with these communities, be it the police shootings, be it the gang shootings, and be it innocent people that always get caught up in the crossfire. But, you know, that's a different thing to what I feel Black Lives Matter is doing, which I'm sure you're going to talk about now, is a completely different thing.
Let's put it this way, Paul.
Yeah.
Boom! Oh my God, you trod on a landmine.
Yeah.
You know, because this is exactly what this topic is like, isn't it? One wrong step, you know, and boom! And especially with the extreme volatility of the cancel culture mobs, and you know the way that you can get yourself deleted completely off social media. You can get yourself completely censored, completely silenced. You know, even if you have the right job, if you like the wrong tweet, it can completely finish your life just for a like.
Yeah.
You know, so this is an extremely sensitive topic. So I'll reciprocate with my own side of that, which is to recognise firstly that you and me are friends. We've known each other for many years. Yeah. We're two white guys talking together. But what I say, from my part of this podcast, is what I say. What you say is what you say. Neither of us automatically agree with anything the other says. Yeah. And, you know, in terms of Black Lives Matter, I mean, the way I like to think about this to start with is to separate the sentiment from the political ideology.
Yeah.
So if I was to say, you know, that's the first trap of all, isn't it? You know, oh, you said black lives don't matter. Oh, you're a racist. Oh, for fuck's sake. You know, so, you know, it starts off with saying the sentiment Black Lives Matter is I agree with in the same as I agree with White Lives Matter, in the same I agree that Brown Lives Matter, in the same I agree that Yellow Lives Matter, in the same I agree that Sky Blue Pink Lives Matter, in the same I agree that all lives matter. Yeah. So I would say that I am an all lives matter campaigner.
Me too.
And I think I always have been.
I think the thing is, I agree. Just to interject there, I think you're totally correct, because all lives matter. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And anyone that says, well, that's not, because you can apply all lives matter to the need for black people who are feeling that their communities are struggling. You can apply that to it. Say, listen, guys, all lives matter, not just white lives. And you can do it in any way you want. But the fact, when you singularize it and just say Black Lives Matter and have a problem with anything else, that's where the racism starts. That's why you get people that then go, well, white lives matter, because if you're going to say Black Lives Matter, then you have to permit white lives matter or Asian lives matter or whatever, gay lives matter, this or that. And that's where that's where it starts. You know what I mean? So for me, it's a provocative title to begin with. Black Lives Matter. It's there to cause provocation, and as you might touch on, you know,
let's put it this way: what colour's God?
Pink with green dots, I reckon.
Nobody can answer that question. I mean, from a spiritual point of view, we all have identical souls.
Yeah.
You know, and from a scientific point of view, we're all one species, and anybody who's fertile can mate with somebody who's fertile of the opposite sex from anywhere in the world and produce offspring. So it's not as if we are actually separate races in any meaningful way. And I mean, it's part of the nature of human beings, isn't it, to be distracted by surface appearances and to miss the bigger picture of life, you know, because all that skin color is a genetic adaptation to environment. And it's not even part of the main genetic code. It's what's known as an epigenetic adaptation. So if we imagined that all world travel ceased, and that everybody who lives in Britain today, could only lived in Britain and stayed here for 5,000 years, everybody would be white. Because that's what the genes would do to adapt to the solar radiation at this longitude on the planet. Whereas it'd be the same if everybody was any color was in Africa and all travel stopped. After 5,000 years, all of their descendants would be black. So this, for us to get hung up on these things, I mean, it's partly why racism is idiotic in itself, because it certainly isn't based in science.
Absolutely. Just to interject there, because I think you made an interesting point, and it's relevant, but I think it's relevant and irrelevant at the same time, because, yeah, you're right. It's race. As beings, we're all connected to the same source of what we are. But I think, for me, race is still a part of nature, as you say. I mean, even if we were here for thousands and thousands of years, maybe we would change, or white people would become black, or vice versa. But that's still a part of nature that makes that happen. So it's still there. And just to make my point clearer on the race thing is I think if you're talking about individuals as well, like if one of us was black, if say you were black and I'm white, then it just comes down to our individual. Do we get on? Are you a nice guy? Am I a nice guy? We're friends. Have we adapted to where we're living? Yada, yada, yada. But I think...
Well, this is Martin Luther King, isn't it? The content of man's character.
But I think when you're talking collectively, when you're talking about a collective group, that's where a racial... a nature of race comes into it. I think if you suddenly got everyone from Africa and put them in England, and it would take an extremely long time for them to create the same culture that we did and stuff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think I celebrate that.
Talking about here, isn't it?
But I do get your point that if you're talking about human to human and what we both want, we both like to be happy, we both like love, we like food, we like, then really race or not, even if race is real, then we should still be able to get on. Even races should still get on. We shouldn't have. I don't think we should need to eliminate the existence of race to get on. We should say, no, you're black, I'm white, this guy's Asian, this guy's Arabic. We can still get on. We can still be different and get on.
It's not so long ago when there was extreme prejudice in England against the Irish.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And genetically, we're absolutely the same people. Or the very idea of a united kingdom was based on the English, the Cornish, the Welsh, the Scottish, all coming together in common cause to get beyond being plagued with cultural conflict that raged all the way through the Dark Ages. And the medieval times, to actually say, you know what, we're better off if we learn to prosper together in peace than war against each other over ideology.
Yeah.
Particularly religion, Catholic, Protestant. So, I think that one of the things I love about my country is that the British culture represents transcending these cultural differences, which exist in our perception, not in reality. Because it's what we've become. It's what we've become. We could almost say indoctrinated in through absorbing the culture as we're born and we grow up in the place in which we grow up. And to see beyond those differences, to see what we have in common. So I think this is one of the things. We're going to talk about Black Lives Matter, which means in a large part we're going to talk about America. But I think it's important to recognise America and Britain are not the same.
Yeah, it's a different history, isn't it, with this subject?
There was only one person who was black who was killed by police last year in the whole of the United Kingdom. And that was the terrorist on, wasn't it? Which was it, Westminster Bridge? The Polish guy and the other guys had to come at him with a narwhal tusk, and he had a fake bomb vest on. His name escapes me right now because I don't really remember the name of the terrorist, if I can help it. But the point is, that's the only time that happened in the UK. And yet our society is convulsing because of what's happening in America, because now we're in the information age and the age of social media. The two cultures reverberate together like they never did before, even though we are not the same culture and we don't have the same issues in the United Kingdom as they have in the United States. And that's also part of this picture, in that what we're looking at is each individual country in the Western world is having to react to what is an international ideology with internationalist aims, which are quite explicitly against some of the profound interests of nation states. Especially when we get into terms of destroying capitalism and so forth. So perhaps we should start by actually just kind of setting out a little bit of detail about who Black Lives Matter actually are, so we know who we're actually talking about.
And I take it you've done extensive research on this.
Oh, I happen to have some notes, Paul. You know how that goes. Well, look, Black Lives Matter as an organisation came into being around about 2013. And the catalysing event was the trial of a man called George Zimmerman for the shooting of a young African-American guy called Trayvon Martin. And this was one of those cases that just absolutely polarized America. Zimmerman was a community watchman, and he was tailing Trayvon Martin because basically he believed he was up to no good. There was a confrontation, there was a struggle, a gun went off, and Martin ended up dead on the floor, and Zimmerman went on trial. Now, I'm not going to rehash the whole basis of the trial itself. It was a hell of a case. I don't think I'd have liked to be on the jury on that case, but nevertheless, the outcome was that Zimmerman was acquitted. And, this led 3 activists, very committed left-wing activists, to start to talk about this. And they were the first ones who were known to have started to get the hashtag Black Lives Matter trending. Their names are Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullon, and Opal Tometi. So, all of them were activists before that time. They'd had the sort of political education institutions, education institutions and so on. So they were the first people to kind of get what's become the movement Black Lives Matter going. Now, they started off really as a kind of internet campaign, but then the next year, their first direct action was the Ferguson protest with the shooting of another guy called Michael Brown. And so at that point, they became a street movement, and their reputation really started to take off. It's also interesting in that it was at that point that there started to be a Palestinian connection to Black Lives Matter. Because when the Ferguson riots, protest riots were going on, a group of Palestinian activists started to give these protesters tips on how to deal with police firing tear gas and things like this. And they were the first ones to sort of start to draw in this idea about how the Israeli police services had been training United States police services. And of course, that, in fact, has just caused the sacking of Long Martin, Long Bailey, rather, from the Labour front bench just a couple of days ago, because she retweeted an article by the actor Martin Peake, which suggested that Israeli services trained U.S. police in the use of neck kneeling as a restraint technique, but that was a claim that has no basis in fact It's not been proven. So that caused the firing of Rebecca Long Bailey for echoing this. But so it's interesting that, you know, this Israeli Palestinian kind of activist blending in with Black Lives Matter started over 6 years ago, and it has been part of the whole axis of what led into left anti-Semitism, which of course we've had left anti-Semitism riddling not only the Labour Party but the Green Party and even the Liberal Democrat Party here in the UK. So that was when Black Lives Matter endorsed the BDS, the boycott sanction movement. So they started to sort of form this internationalist aspect to what they were doing, and that led Black Lives Matter to call Israel an apartheid state, and you know, this aspect of anti-Semitism became more part of that political soup. So they're actually, Black Lives Matter is one of more than 50 black-led organisations that have joined the BDS movement. And so it's really a strong axis on the hard left in hard Democrat politics. That we see in people like Bernie Sanders, Ilhan, not so much the anti-Semitism part of Bernie Sanders, but the Palestinian sympathy part. Then we've got Ilhan Omar and Ocasio-Cortez, and the squad, as President Trump calls them. So this kind of started to cement Black Lives Matter into the apparatus of the Democratic Party. And it's at that point that they started to get massive funding, which of course connects to the Soros organizations. So from 2016, they started to demand decarceration, in other words, emptying prisons, reparations for slavery, the end of mass surveillance, mass investment in education, and community control of police. So that became so popular in the zeitgeist that they started to win awards and started to get applauded by corporations, started to get kind of corporate support. In actual fact, in 2014, Black Lives Matter was first lauded as a hashtag that changed the world. So by the end of 2016, there were at least 30 million uses of the hashtag Black Lives Matter on Twitter. That's a lot of hashtags. So this is how they could have built up. From 2017 to 2019, they continued regular protests within the United States, and then we get to this year. We've got a series of catalyzing events. The first was on February 23rd, where a young African-American called Ahmed Arbery was shot dead while jogging in Glynn County in Georgia. Do you remember this case?
No, I don't think I do.
Well, basically, he was jogging along the road. Some neighbours rang up a couple of guys, one of whom was an ex-sheriff with his son, and said that they'd seen the guy at a building site. They go to stop the guy. There's some sort of struggle over a shotgun, and the guy ends up shot dead. And those guys have been arrested, and they're going to face trial for murder for that. We'll see what happens with it. Then on March the 13th, an African-American lady called Breonna. Oh gosh, I may have a problem there with my notes. I can't read my own notes there. But she was shot dead for a no-knock warrant. And this is when the police turn up and bang your door down without telling you they're going to do it.
Right.
Because it was a drugs warrant. And in the process of serving that warrant, she was shot dead. Circumstances are very murky. And because of that, there's demands to end no-knock warrants in the United States. And then two things happened on May the 25th. The first one actually was trending pretty hard and lighting Twitter up until it got replaced by the second one. And this is a guy called Christian Cooper, and he was in Central Park in New York, and he challenged a young white lady who had her dog off the lead in an area where you're not supposed to have your dog off the lead because it's a preserve for wild birds who are nesting. And in the process of him challenging her, he got her on his phone, where she was basically phoning up the police and starting to put on histrionics, and make outrageous claims that she was being, attacked by a black man. Because she was so obviously kind of ramping up the hysteria to kind of, I mean, some people described it as a battle of the Karens, because they're both of the same kind of leftist ideologies, but basically she tried to assert her feminist privilege by playing up to trump his blackness. And that itself was a quite strong inciting incident. And then later the same day, we have the killing of George Floyd from that awful, terrible arrest in Minneapolis. Yeah. And at that point, Black Lives Matter went into full bore. And to throwing everything they had at the situation. And of course, they've been training for just such a thing to happen. But you see, the problem is, with America, there is a very great deal of violence in America. Yeah. It's their culture. I don't judge it. Americans are very, very wedded to their right to bear arms. And there are so many firearms in America, but it's certainly true that if the regular citizens were no longer able to carry guns, it would leave guns massively in the hands of the criminals. So trying to defuse the issue of gun violence in America, that's a huge issue in itself. It's very hard to unpick, but it meant that it was only a matter of time before there would be some sort of incident that Black Lives Matter could get behind to push politically. And, with it being an election year and with the close alliance that they've built up with the Democratic Party, the radical side of the Democratic Party, over the last few years, it was inevitable that they were going to be able to weaponize that massively to get people out onto the streets. And once you get people out onto the streets and get them angry and get them shouting at the police and the lights go down because it gets dark, the looting starts. Yeah. Because that's human nature. It's one thing to have an organized, well-run protest day, but when you've got people coming out in the streets in an outpouring of public anger, and it's being incited with some very, very fiery rhetoric, it's inevitable. If you get that happening enough, there's going to be people taking advantage for all sorts of reasons. In fact, I think I heard an interview with a black American lady who she said that there's three types of people. There's the protesters who are out there because they believe in a cause and they want to make a point. There's the rioters who are out there because they want to keep a piece of kicking. And there's the looters who are out there to get the stuff that they want. And they're actually three quite separate groups with three quite different perceptions who don't necessarily give a shit about each other. Like the rioters aren't going to back down from a chance to give the police a kicking just because the protester says that's not what the protest is about. Yeah. And if you want to steal stuff, then mass unrest is a perfect time to go and nick it. So it's a combination of all of these factors that have just seen America light up from coast to coast. Pretty much every Democrat-run city has seen major problems.
Yeah,
and that's how we've got to where we are today.
That's very fishy, that, isn't it? Because and there's also those reports of there was bricks left out, provided for them to throw them and stuff. And it just seems the whole thing to me, and this links in a little bit with some of the propaganda that's gone around with the virus, and a lot of people wanting to prolong lockdown and this kind of stuff. Is it seems like, Brexit happened, Trump happened. This whole twist of global trajectory with the trade and with nationalism raising in a lot of the big countries. And then all of a sudden we see this prolonged, this almost like relishing this lockdown. And now this Black Lives Matter movement that's exploding. And it's all leans towards pushing for more taxation, less nationalism. And it seems like such a coincidence, doesn't it? It really does.
Well, I mean, actually, our friend QAnon has been extremely vocal about this aspect of it. Yeah. They never thought she would lose, win by any means.
Yeah. So
QAnon's
been on the ball, is it?
The order the order ab cow of the COVID-19 situation.
And so Q's been on the ball, is he? I haven't been following.
Q's been saying quite a bit about this. It's if you go to the Black Lives Matter page, and click donate,
their website,
I want to donate money to Black Lives Matter. As soon as you do that, the very next page, the URL switches to Act Blue, which is the fundraising site for the Democratic Party. So, Blimey. Black Lives Matter funds in the US are being channeled through the Democratic Party website, and that is evidenced that massive amounts of funding is being diverted to Democratic candidates.
Yeah.
So it's ironic, but if somebody is kind of well-meaning and wants to do their part, is horrified by what's happening to the black community and really feels that they need to do something to help, and they donate money thinking that's going to go to black communities, it doesn't. It's going to a lot of white and Hispanic politicians, including, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So, and there's another one of these, which is that they had a bail fund which received $35 million in donations in just a few days. And the idea is you're a protester, you get arrested during the protests, there's a bail fund to get you bail, to get you out and to give you legal help. How much out of that 35 million has that bail fund actually spent?
Yeah.
200,000. So, we're talking about 2%, whereas this massive amount of money which is being held on to or is going in other directions. Now, exactly what the reason for that is another question. In the same way, Black Lives Matter UK, which are an offshoot of that organisation but operates within its own recognizance, they've not been able to receive their funding from their GoFundMe page yet, because GoFundMe is declining to hand it over because Black Lives Matter UK doesn't have a credible structure into which to put the money.
Sure, they'll get it. I'm sure they'll get it.
Well, they probably will, but the fact that Black Lives Matter UK is a far more ramshackle organisation, but at the same time, the demands of Black Lives Matter UK, are abolish capitalism, abolish whiteness, abolish police, abolish prisons.
The most racist policy I've ever.
The American version.
And abolishing whiteness is the most racist policy I've ever lived through. And the thing is, people can explain it. What whiteness is. Basically, what whiteness they're saying is it's a society that white people built to benefit white people. And the thing is with me, I've got no problem with a black person or an Asian person coming and benefiting from that system themselves, saying, I like it here, I like the system you've created, I like living here, I want to live here and contribute. Great, no problem. But if it's get to the stage now, we're like, actually, you know what, we don't like this system, we want to change it. And that's where I think, oh, well, that's not, you know, whiteness. Is there Arabicness? Is there blackness? Is it, you know, it's almost like so only white people have an is.
This is the problem with the very idea of whiteness. I think we may as well switch over to talking about the UK a bit, because I think this is a perfect opportunity to talk about Priyamvada Gopal. As she is the Cambridge University academic who earlier this week said that white lives don't matter as white lives.
Yeah, of course they don't.
As well as tweeting, abolish whiteness. Now,
that is power, isn't it? That is what you call it, privilege and power.
It's a pretty goddamn privilege, because I know that if I tweeted Black lives don't matter as black lives, my account wouldn't have lasted. You know, it wouldn't have made it 1 minute.
That's it.
You know, I cannot say that without having my platform destroyed. She could say that with impunity because she is not white,
and she's a woman as well. That's another.
Well, that's another
she's
one
got
of the
two victim tokens there.
Sexual pecking order, you know. Yes,
wallet's full with victim tokens, mate. She's packed solid.
But we should need to try to understand what she's trying to say, because we need to understand what she's trying to say in order to properly refute it.
Yeah, true.
So it's a semantic game. I mean, with Gopal, she is a sophist, meaning that she is somebody who is more interested in winning an argument and getting empowered from that argument than the truth of that argument. So she's quite happy to say white lives don't matter as white lives, while at the same time she won't apply the equal standard to say black lives don't matter, brown lives don't matter, yellow lives don't matter as black lives, as brown lives, as yellow lives. So straight away she's got an inherent hypocrisy in what she's saying, because she's taking away the agency of white people. You know, she's saying you don't have the basis of saying that your lives matter because of your whiteness, but at the same time I won't say the same thing about black lives, brown lives, yellow lives. You know, because what she's looking to do is she's looking to redistribute privilege
as a communist. Yeah.
What she's not trying to do is abolish privilege. She's trying to redistribute privilege. You know, so that means that you want to be in a position where she can effectively say brown lives matter more, and you can't say otherwise because you're racist while I can't be racist.
Absolutely, yeah. This is their technical.
And the basis of that is the Marxist theory of institutional racism.
And that's why the media like to ignore any racial attacks on white people. I'll just quickly interject. The horrible video I saw was from Cork. I can't remember the guy's name. He was stabbed to death by this black gang, and they were taunting him. And you actually saw them pulling up his shirt, re-stabbing the area, torturing him. And he's lying in a bit. There's a woman cradling him, trying to protect him and stuff, and comforting him. And they left sort of racial slurs. We're going to come and get your women. We're going to do this with the white people are in trouble.
It was horrifying.
He's out on bail now and stuff. Now I understand this happened. Racial attacks happen, but this was what the most horrific racial attack I've seen on video. Easily the most horrific, and no one's really heard about it. You see, because the thing is, it gets me is it's almost like this mindset is, we don't want to rally people too much because otherwise then the minorities will suffer. And to an extent, that might be, there's a small argument to that. But it's getting to the stage where they don't mind rallying Black Lives Matter or other to go out and attack white, because of that. A lot of these attacks are because people have been riled and provoked and encouraged to hate white people. And that's clearly happening now. Why wouldn't it happen? Why wouldn't the black community start to hate white people?
When you racialise the social argument, you know, but when you racialise the social argument in only one way and apply double standards, like Privada Gopal, then of course you're going to create a counter reaction.
Of course, yeah.
You see, I mean, there's several aspects I immediately thinking that I could bring into this. I mean, if we think back to the dark days of Germany, when we had a political situation which was intensely radicalized, the extreme left creates the extreme right and vice versa. Because as soon as people go, sod you, you don't matter, I'm going to have it my way, and I'm going to use mass organised violence to do it, sod you back, I'm going to use a mass organised violence to do it, then the ability of people to have a social debate in the centre and to come to agreement as a moderated democratic centre is obliterated by the violence. And obviously this is part of what the UK state is trying to prevent, because it's been trying not to allow the right to rise to the provocations of the left, but at the same time it's not been handling the provocations of the left, and it's been making the same mistake that Chamberlain did, which is appeasement.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's Churchill's famous statement, you cannot bargain with a tiger when your head is in its mouth.
Yeah.
Because what's to stop it biting more? That's the problem, isn't it? Yeah. So we have seen how it's essential that everybody stays home to save lives, and everyone's got this terrible disease going around, and everybody must stay home, unless you want to absolutely ignore everything in the name of Black Lives Matter, crowd together and shout a lot, and try and pull down our heritage and denounce it as racist. If you want to do that, you go ahead, because we're just going to stand back or even run away from you.
But don't go to the beach. For God's sake, don't go to the beach and leave your litter on the floor.
Going to the beach is a crisis.
Don't go and get some vitamin D and soak up the minerals in the seawater. That's terrible. Don't do that. But if you want to go and be a Marxist in central London, you go for it.
This is the essential problem that we've now got. Yes, this is absolutely it. And, I can't say the government is doing very well with it, because it isn't.
No.
And we've got no progress on so many things at the moment. We've got no progress on stopping the influx of illegal migrants coming across the channel. We've got no progress on deportation of people who shouldn't be here. We've got no progress on the grooming gang report. We've got no progress on the Russia report. And the only thing which is holding together at the moment is we're still on course for Brexit. But we are in a very perilous position, and both politically and culturally. And let's come back to what Privada Gopal was saying. This idea of structural whiteness. What she's really saying is that the fact that this is a Western country which is developed through a Western cultural history has meant that the very basis of the society is unacceptable and must be changed by force. That's what she's really saying. But if you say, can you point me in law to this institutional racism? Could you show me where in the laws this exists? Can you show me where in the laws this bias is being applied? They can't, because it doesn't exist, because we solved these problems decades ago. So it's more about the perception of how a statue of Rhodes makes you feel. For example. How knowing that a statue of a guy who may have done some very good things, like deliver education to the very poorest and raise the standard of living for an entire city, needs to be torn down because his businesses were involved in the slave trade. Or how the idea of the idea of Britain as achieving something by abolishing slavery in the British Empire 190 years ago is tarnished by the fact that people who had businesses which were involved in the slave trade were compensated for ending those businesses and forcing them to change the way that they did business if they didn't have anything to do with slavery anymore.
Yeah.
So what if we took it at 1830, we're 40 years before Marx, before Darwin, and before the American Civil War. So Britain was well ahead of the curve in doing something about slavery. Not only that, but it had taken 60 years of campaigning by people of deeply held religious conviction who sought to abolish slavery as an offence in the eyes of God, fighting against those who wished to use people in the eyes of profit. And they won that battle, but they had to do it within the structures of those times. And to achieve that, the British Empire put in fully 50% of its GDP for that year to pay to free the slaves, which at the time was 800,000 slaves in the British Empire.
That's it, yeah. There seems to
and we only finished paying that debt back to the Treasury in 2015.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's a fact.
But the fact that every British taxpayer in the last 190 years has given the profit from their labours to free people who were held as slaves 190 years ago gets zero recognition and zero credit. Because from today's sensibility, oh, how dare you give people money, people who were profiting from slavery? Oh, you monsters! Let alone the fact that that was the only effective solution to actually solve the damn problem.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it solved the problem. It freed the slaves. You can't just throw a load of people out there and then businesses that can't afford to pay wages and so on. It would have just snowballed into different issues, because what people as well don't realise in this era was that working labour from workers that were just doing manual labour were pretty much slaves themselves anyway. There was no workers' rights. Not at
that time, no, there wasn't.
So the difference is basically, right, you go and pay for your own board and food and see on Monday. If you're ill, you don't get your money. It wasn't a lot different.
We didn't even have universal suffrage. We didn't have universal voting rights. We didn't have universal right to education.
Yeah, if you didn't own property, So the whole era, I'm not saying that, slaves didn't have it bad. Of course, all slaves around the world did. But it's just what Marxists generally do. They get a little tunnel and they just aim the tunnel in an area they want to reflect and to magnify, and they ignore everything else that goes around it. They'll ignore...
they're just weaponising whatever they can get to destroy the system, because they want to replace it with another system where they are the privileged ones, where they have the whip hand. I think what it's always been about. That's what communism was.
Yeah. The funny thing is, just to get this point in, that the funny thing is, it's almost like a lot of the white folks, because a lot of this is pushed by white folks. A lot of black folks are scratching their heads looking, again, these funny white people, what are they up to? Yeah, a lot of them are thinking that. And a lot of these white liberals, right, they're actually, in a way, crypto white supremacists themselves, because they look at the white countries, the white people, and I can only assume they feel immortal. They feel we're so secure and fantastic and great. We don't need to worry about ourselves. We'll just worry about the black community, or we'll just worry about Muslims and all that. We're fine. We're not. We got no problems. We're untouchable, man. We're so fantastic. We don't need to have an identity. We don't need to worry about white racism. We're fantastic. We're just going to solve everyone else's problems because we're white and we're the morally superior superheroes. Do you know what I mean? That's what it comes across. Some of the memes I've seen people post.
I do.
Yeah.
Because I have another thing to say about this, which is to say, in a way, the Marxists have a point. And the point is this: if racism exists anywhere in our society, it exists only at the top tier of our society.
Yeah.
Because, the poor muggins getting along have to get along to get along. And we've learned a lot better. We've learned to adapt. We've learned to get over the attitudes that we had maybe in the 50s, 60s, 70s, because we've become used to each other, except where you have incoming cultures that refuse to assimilate and become part of British culture, like, certain parts of the Islamic culture, and why that's caused problems, But by and large, racism does not exist at the bottom level of this society because there is no structure for it. Everybody's equal in terms of the law. Where white privilege may still exist is at the top of banking, is at the top of entertainment, and is at the top of the university system, is at the top of the, but not so much would I accept that from the civil service and the government, because they have been under far more scrutiny to ensure that they are making adaptations, And I mean, one example of this, would be J.J. Abrams, the film director.
Oh, yeah.
He directed the Star Trek films, and then he directed 2 of the last terrible Star Wars films, and he runs the studio Bad Robot, So J.J. Abrams is quite willing to get out there and wave the flag for Black Lives Matter and say, we stand with Black Lives Matter, disregarding that it's cultural Marxism, he will say that to stand with the sentiment that Black Lives Matter. But when you look at how J.J. Abrams himself has run his productions, and if you look at photographs from the production crews of his productions, you don't see many non-white faces there, Paul.
Mm.
So, in that sense, it's for people who've held on to a high level of privilege who are most likely to still have a high level of prejudice.
Oh yeah, well,
that's interesting in itself, because look how many entertainers and actors are prostituting themselves to signal their virtue toward Black Lives Matter. So in that sense, there's a point, but I still believe that what's wrong is to say that is whiteness, because what it really is simply privilege. They're just as prejudiced against working class whites as they are against working class blacks.
I guess from their mindset, it's like, what does it matter what colour the little people are? It doesn't matter what colour the little people are. It's only we don't need to worry about that.
How much sheer seething hatred does the top level of the British establishment still hold against the ordinary British people for voting for Brexit?
Oh, they're absolutely fuming.
Absolutely.
As I said earlier,
incandescently fuming.
As I said earlier on, it's all to do with that.
Is it really about race privilege, or is it just privilege? So, if Fiona Vote Power was saying abolish privilege, she might even have coming towards a message that we could get behind. But that's not what she's doing, because what she's saying is abolish privilege for white people so privilege can be held by black and brown people. She doesn't seem to think anything much.
They never comment what's going on in other countries, do they? The privilege that the Chinese have, or the Japanese, or the Arabs. They couldn't give a damn about that privilege. It's only Western privilege. I don't see talked about. I mean, I've looked at a lot of Black Lives Matter accounts. I've done quite a bit of looking around, over the last month into this. Nobody is talking about modern slavery. Absolutely, and it's definitely going on. It's not conspiracy. It is going on. Slavery. There are almost 10 million, at least, Africans enslaved by Africans today. There are estimated up to 40 million people bound into slavery worldwide. Some estimates say it's as much as 1 in 200 people alive right now are living as slaves. What they're not doing is living as slaves in the West, because the West abolished slavery, just as the
West abolished any legal basis for racism, except where slaves are being trafficked into the West by illegal legal migration.
Yeah,
you know, and so we've got people being trafficked in as slaves to work farms or to grow drugs or to prostitute themselves, literally. For criminal gangs who have enslaved them. But of course, not all those slaves are in any way black, because a lot of people are being enslaved from Eastern European countries and brought into Western Europe.
Well, of course, the
this
word...
is not, if you look at nonsense on top of nonsenses, because the bottom line is they want a political revolution in America, and blackness is an excuse to get it, because if you are black and living in America, or black and living in Britain, or brown or yellow, and you don't conform to the ideology, then they are classifying you as ideologically white.
Yeah.
And if you want to see evidence of that, you only need to look at the racist bile which is directed at people like Rooney, what's his surname, Paul, the current Chancellor, my mind's gone blank, or Priti Patel, and the other, other like James Cleverly and so forth, but being part of the Conservative Party, for being socially conservative in their politics.
They're traitors. Yeah. Traitors to the, for not thinking the same way.
Race traitors for not being far leftists.
Yeah. That's right.
And I can tell you now from looking at her account, Primvada Gopal is just as guilty of that.
Yeah.
As well as other well-known faces like Ash Sarkar. And just anybody on the far left of British politics, basically. You're only allowed to have status for your race if you ideologically conform. And another aspect of this, of course, is if you could particularly see it in footage from the protests in America, where you would see very aggressive young white people shouting about Black Lives Matter into the faces of black police officers, because as soon as you're wearing a uniform, you're not a black life, you're a blue life, and ACAB, all cops are bastards. Which is why when you get a man like the retired police officer who was shot defending his friend's pawn shop business. He died, protecting his friend's business from looting, and he was given that all 6 suspects in his killing are ethnically black. He certainly wasn't killed by anybody white. That's David Dawn. And there are other police officers who've lost their lives in the protests who were ethnically black, but they don't count. You see, I saw footage yesterday from a man standing in front of the Emancipation statue. I think it's in Washington, D.C. He was trying to educate the rabid mob of Antifa / Black Lives Matter, largely white, very aggressive people, that his grandfather was one of the ex-slaves who funded that statue to commemorate their freedom. But of course, once you start saying tear stuff down, and when the real motive is to tear it all down, people don't really want to ask a lot of questions. They just want to feel good about tearing shit down.
That's it. Yeah.
So we are in a mess of hypocrisy, and we need to find a way forward to find some strong moral direction. And the only way that I know that we can realistically do that is to unite around our cultural identity as a nation, where it doesn't matter if you're white, black, brown or yellow. What matters is that you're British first and foremost, and we are all agreeing to live in the same society under the same laws. That's the only way that we can achieve justice. That's the only way that we can achieve equality, because anything else is just perpetuating the imbalance in different forms, and it's being stoked up to such radicalized levels now that the risks, I don't think they've ever really been higher. So my view is to say that patriots have no skin color. But if Primvada Powell can say that white lives don't matter because they are white, why can't she say patriots have no skin color? That's because she's got no loyalty to this society.
I'd agree with that. My fear is that
enemy of us.
My fear is with that is if ever there's a period where white people do particularly well at something, or be it a certain sport or this or that, there's always going to be a clan that's going to say they're doing it because the system's suiting them more than it's suiting us. And my fear is we're always going to have to bang down. It's that whole communism thing that no one's allowed to, because the thing is, for some reason, whatever reason it may be, you might find white people are just better at swimmers. It could be something very small, in genetically small, but when you're at that level where it's just that little inch that takes you that further, white people excel. Just like sprinting, short sprinting, black people, they've just got that tiny little thing that gives them that advantage, and that can happen. And the ideology that's doing this are always going to pick on something. They don't want any group to, and that's my only fear. With the patriot, I'm absolutely fine. I think if you're black or Asian and you're British and you're proud British, then you should be patriotic. Absolutely. You moved here, your family moved here, and you're happy to be British. You support the culture here, you support the history. There's no reason why we all can't be British and get on like that. I'd absolutely agree with you. But with this other ideology that's already very prominent in this, I just see many, many years of issues and problems. I really don't know where we're going to go, but that's my view. But we are heading towards that time. So do you want to sort of start wrapping it up, say something and wrap it up?
Yeah, well, I was just briefly going to say that men are better at women than running. But, this leftist ideology, all merging together, and of course, as well as the Antifa and the Democrat Party and the hard left sort of alliance with Black Lives Matter, there's also the transgender alliance with Black Lives Matter, and we've currently got this argument going on about the gender recognition law, where basically if you as long as you attend a couple of appointments, you can put your hand up and say I'm a woman now, without having any kind of surgery or hormonal treatment, and demand to be allowed to compete in women's sports, So, I mean, in terms of communism, what we are seeing now is classic communist subversion, where you break down a society and make it nonsense so that your violent movement can take over its institutions and reorder it with a revolution. Just the same way that smashing down statues is absolutely part of the Maoist revolution, but everything has to go. And I must make sure that I also mention this has infected the Church of England too, because only yesterday I gave the Archbishop of Canterbury what for on Twitter for saying that he wants to review what art and statues are in Church of England buildings, because of the offence of whiteness. And in just the same way, you've got Black Lives Matter activists demanding the same thing of churches in America. And at the same time, there's a bit of a rash of church arson going on over there, Paul. But, again, you can gather for a protest as much as you like, but don't you dare try and go to church. That's the sort of convulsions, and of course going to church is very much a bigger thing still in America than it is in Britain by massive margin. Christian worship is far stronger there. There's no doubt about
Didn't
that.
Muhammad own slaves? I think he did.
Well,
let's not go there anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Muhammad was a bit of a conqueror, wasn't he, Paul? And when you conquer people, you tend to enslave them.
Yeah, but if you married a woman, then she's no longer a slave, so he was all right.
Let's definitely not go there. No. I mean, what culture is immune to criticism?
Exactly. Well, that's it. That's it. I'm not just picking on Muslims.
Point there, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the hypocrisy. That's
I wouldn't want to think that there weren't good-hearted Muslims who want to muck along, to get along, and want to be one shared culture, because I know that it is true that they are there, and I know that they are the majority. And
a lot of them know what's going on more than
things. Yeah. It's the noisy troublemakers who will look for any reason to find offence, and the more you try and appease them, the more aggressive they get, the more you give, the more they demand, and the more entitled and privileged they become. Yeah. And, to summarise this, because we're getting near to time, I believe that this is a time where the world is convulsing, and at times like this, it's an opportunity for change for both good and bad. And the difference about that is the people who are going to stand up and make that change in a multitude of different ways. And there is a great awakening going on. There is a revival of patriotism going on. There is a revival of values going on. And this is part of what happens to civilizations. I mean, there is no doubt at the moment Western civilization has been considerably weakened, especially since the advent of social media and the radicalizing effect of echo chambers, making it much harder for people to meet in the middle and listen to each other. Yeah. But this is exactly when know yourself becomes crucial, because if you don't know yourself, then other people are going to define who you are for you. You're white, therefore you're racist. And that's part of what we need to stand up against, but not in a way that we fall into the trap of becoming what we oppose. Yeah. Because that way the enemy will win.
Yeah, we've got to keep our diplomacy. I think we've got to keep brave. Don't be afraid to speak out, even if you think you sound controversial. As long as you're being diplomatic, fair and honest, speak your mind. Because if you don't speak your mind, you're going to lose your free speech. You use your speech or lose it, but remain diplomacy. Don't let the frustration make you really hate. So you are becoming a hate. It's very frustrating, some of these people, and it does make you want to hate them and lash out. But keep your cool, keep smart, and that we're in the position we're in. It's here, so we've got to move forward, and we've got front row seats, as I keep saying.
With wisdom, we will see the way forward. With knowledge, we will defeat their arguments.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where we're going to round up on a positive note. Thanks for coming on again, John. It's been a long time, and we obviously now your health is back on track. Hopefully it stays that way, and you'll be joining us again soon.
I'm sure I can find some more topics for us to talk about. I mean,
I don't think we're going to be short.
Don't start me on COVID-19 at the moment.
I don't think we're going to be short.
Quite a bit I'd add to my last podcast on that one.
Yeah, it's not going to be. We're not going to be short, that's for sure. And we've still got a bit of sunshine.
I look forward to it. We'll do another one very soon.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I hope people have enjoyed this. And come and find me, John the White 1 on Twitter, John the White on Parler.
Oh yeah. Good old Parler. I'm on that as well, and I'll link that. These are all going to be linked on our page as well. So.
Right, love it. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, THA, and look forward to talking to you next time.
Yeah, bye.